Hello, everybody. Welcome to Why We Mazatlan podcast. And yeah, this is Raul. And we have a special guest today. His name is Asher Matson. Asher is, I don't know if to say that you're from Mexico, from Australia, from the States. It's kind of like, but you're going to tell us more about that. He's a missionary in YWAM Mazatlan. But before YWAM Mazatlan, he was a Bethel Church. But you can tell us more about you, Asher. So who are you?
Yeah. So like Raul said, my name's Asher. It's a bit confusing about where I'm from. So I was born in Australia. At the age of 4, moved to Mexico because my parents are full-time missionaries. So moved to Mazatlan and have been here pretty much ever since. So about 18 years I've lived in Mexico. Although, like you said, I went to Bethel Church for about 2 years. So I was doing some stuff, some school up there. Really great. But now God has called me back full-time to work with YWAM Mazatlan and be a full-time missionary.
Yeah, that's great. And I know Asher a little bit, but you guys are going to get to know him more. So I'm very excited about that. So the topic for today and the reason why I'm so excited because we're going to talk about evangelism. And I love that topic. And I know you love it too because you love the nations. That's why you're a missionary. So what if we start from that? What is evangelism?
Yeah, so evangelism to me, in the way that I would describe it, put into my own words, is it really comes from what we believe. So it's preaching, it's having this high value to share the news or a message about what you believe. In my case, in our case as believers, we truly believe that it's the gospel, it's the story as what we consider the greatest love act there is. To carry that and to tell people about it all around the world. So as a missionary, that is our heart, is that we wanna take that message, this thing in the Bible that we read about Jesus, and we want to take it into the world. We want to tell all the people we can about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but just talking about like just taking the gospel, just taking the good news everywhere. But maybe the question for me will be like, how does it look like just to go? Do I have to take a plane and go to a different country? Can I do it in my home? Can I do it in my church? Like, what does it mean in my context?
Yeah, I mean, evangelism is for everyone and anyone. You know, it's not something. Sometimes we can kind of get confused. Where as missionaries, this is our job. This is what we've signed up to do. Is full time, be people who spread the gospel, who travel to far places. But at the same time, we also do things here, practical things here, right where we're at. And what that can look like for you in any area of life is evangelism applies to you, it applies to everyone. Because it's the message, it's the gospel, right? It's not something that you have to get on a plane and go do. You can actually go to your grocery store, go down the road, talk to your neighbor, talk to your friends about it. So you can really tell anyone and everyone about the gospel, about Jesus.
Yeah. Something that you mentioned is like we're giving something, like we are sharing something. Yeah. But something that I think with that is like you are sharing something, but it's because you already have something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's it comes from this thing of like what we choose to believe. And that's part of my story is like I grew up as a missionary kid, but my whole life I didn't know the Lord. Not until I was 16 I actually like really encountered, I really had this face-to-face like really heartfelt experience with God, and that really led me to like discover this for myself. Because many of us, like many times in my case, there are many people who I know who have been Christians their whole life, but have never actually experienced God's love for themselves. Sometimes, it's been through their church, through their parents, their family, whatever. But for me, in my case, at 16, I had this really crazy experience with God and His love. And since that moment, I've been so compelled to go and tell everyone else about this, right? Because when you experience something so good, it's like you really want to share it. Like when you're a kid, you experience like ice cream and you're like, oh my gosh, like this bomb flavor of ice cream. You're like, I want to share this with everyone. Like everyone needs to try this. And that's kind of the same way. Obviously, we're not handing out ice cream to everyone, but the idea is that we would be so motivated, so compelled to share this message, this love that we've experienced with so many people. Because there's so many people in the world who are don't really know what Jesus is or don't know his love and are looking for things, and they just don't know what they're looking for until they actually experience God.
Yeah.
That was my case.
Yeah. And I love that what you're sharing, So it was at the age of 16.
Yeah.
So how that was? Just tell us more about that.
Man. I remember I was here in Guatemala. I was here and we were having this worship time. And it's this time where we come together and we sing songs and we get to, as a community, as a group of people, we get to experience God. Mm-hmm. And it's open to anyone. Like there were many people who were there who were also kind of in the same boat as me, who they heard about God, they heard all these things, but never really experienced his love. So it was something really interesting for me to come into that place and be like a missionary kid, but not really experience God's love. And I remember being in this place of like so desperate, like, God, I really want to experience you. I really want to see what this is about because I've heard about you. I've heard stories. I grew up as a missionary kid. My parents know this, but what about me? Where's my own personal experience? And that night, I remember we were worshiping, we were singing songs, and all of a sudden, someone came behind me and they laid hands on me. And they started to pray, and they started to just speak things about me that had no clue that, like, there's no way nobody knows this about my life. But it's like they read my mail. They knew exactly what I was going through. And that's when I knew. I was like, wow, maybe this whole God thing is real. Maybe there is a God. Maybe that he does know my life, even if I don't know him.
Wow.
And so I decided to really give my life and to say, you know what? I don't know what this is about. And this is a journey that I'm ready to go on. But there's no way that's this person knew so accurately what they're saying about my life or speaking. I was like, okay, God must be real. So I remember giving my life to the Lord. And while I wasn't necessarily what you would call evangelized to say, I had an experience, I had an encounter with God is what we like to say. And that's when I met his love. So while I wasn't necessarily out on the street and someone came to me, like we can normally understand evangelism as, or sometimes even people call it witnessing. I don't like to use that term, but some people do. I didn't have that moment on the street, but I experienced God's love, and that's the whole point. It's not about the loudest person telling you who God is, but it's having your own personal experience, own personal encounter with God's love.
So an encounter we got at the age of 16, it leads you to something else.
Oh yeah, because once you experience God, once you experience his love, you're not the same. After that, like all the things that I was carrying before, like this weight, this like burden, this feeling of like anxiety and all these things, like was gone. The moment that I like gave my life to the Lord and I decided like I really want this, didn't mean all of my problems just magically went away. But it meant that the weight of the things that I was feeling in my personal and daily life was gone, because I knew that there was a sense of peace, and that's what his love really brings, is this peace, and it's something that comforts you and it makes you feel so at home. And that's the only best way I guess I can kind of describe it. It's like coming home to family for the first time.
Wow, and I 100% agree with you. Like, and you know me a little bit more, and I believe like an encounter leads you into something else. Yeah. So if you don't have an encounter with God, or you haven't had an encounter with God, you cannot give something. So you are not be able to give something that you don't have. And this is the point. So that's why I asked you the question, like, what happened at the age of 16? And just like I encourage like everyone who's like listening to us right now, like, you need to have an encounter. Like, we are so passionate about the good news. We are so passionate about Jesus, but it's because we have met Jesus. And this is the whole point of the story.
Normally when you meet someone who is trying to tell you about Jesus, they're really stoked and they're really positive and really happy, and you're like, how are you this happy? And it's not that they're on something, but it's that they have this encounter, and that encounter, that experience with God and his love has fully transformed you from your old way of living, per se. You're still the same person. It's not like you got a new identity, but you are different in a way, because his love actually transforms you. So therefore, once you're transformed, you have nothing else to do. You're like, I want to share this with so many people. Because you recognize, like, man, I know where my life was. And I know that so many people, even my friends, there was people I knew, like, they go through the same thing that I go through. But now I have this, like, key or this answer to life and then the things that I was going through. So naturally, my response was like, okay, shoot, like, I want to take this to as many people as I can. And that's part of evangelizing, is like you cannot go and share about Jesus if you have not met Jesus for yourself first.
Yeah.
That's
sure.
part of it. That's the foundation of evangelism, is first you meet and then you go do.
I like that.
And that's
first
what,
you meet and then you what?
Then you go do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we read in the Bible. You know, if we look through the life of Jesus walking with the disciples, there was a time of intimately knowing Jesus in the flesh. And then to the point where Jesus goes and we know the story of he dies, he resurrects, he comes back. But then the final chapter in many of the Gospels, I like the best one, or my favorite, is in Matthew 28. It says, go into all the nations. And he says, heal the sick, and he's commissioning them to go and do this thing that we put to words as evangelism.
So I like that, and I want to ask you a question with that.
Go for it.
Because he says, go into all the nations.
Yeah.
But can we stay at home? Can we stay in our hometown? Can we stay in our country? Or we have to go out and able to evangelize? So how that looks like?
Going into all the nations implies the nation that you're currently in. All the nations is all the nations, not everyone except yours. That's the idea. Is like we want to go into everywhere, but we want to make sure that where we're at right now. So if I'm in Mexico right now, I want to make sure that I'm doing as much to bring the gospel, to evangelize to people here as I do in the nations. But part of the commission, part of what the call that he asks us to do is to go out into the nations. And that's normally, that's essentially where we get the idea of being a missionary, is that we'd go leave our homes, leave everything behind to become radical people who go after these things that Jesus has called us to do. We're radical for Jesus in a sense.
So do I have to be a missionary, or can I just be a normal person and just share what I have? Or
you can be any person. Okay. You can work in any sphere of society, which is you can work in business, you can work in the arts, you could be a teacher and working in education, member of Congress. You can do anything you want. You can be an ordinary person. You can work at your local grocery store and you can preach the gospel.
You can be an ordinary person just walking in the most extraordinary life.
Exactly.
But how that looks like, because you share, it says go into all the nations, like preach, heal, all of those things that Jesus told us to do. But how that looks like practical, like in a practical way.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, it first starts with you meeting Jesus. The next steps after that is you begin to develop this thing that we call intimate friendship or a relationship with God. You get to know him, he gets to know you, because it's a relationship, right? It's a two-way street. It's not he gets to know me and I know nothing about him. It's not I get to know him and he knows nothing about me. It's both. And so it's this friendship that you develop with him. And the best way, I think, or one of the best ways, I guess you could describe it, because there are many ways, but when you have a really good friend and you're like, this person is incredible. You have that connection. You're like, this person's incredible. Like, other people need to meet this person. That's the same idea, as you want to share that person with so many others, because you know that the things that they have on their life. You know that the things that they carry, they're super positive, they love, they comfort. They're the best people to be around.
So it's all the time. It's not just in a special.
It's not just in seasons or different things. It's all the time. Jesus is always the same. So naturally, the call is to always be people who spread the good news about this friendship that we have.
Yeah.
So you don't have to necessarily be a missionary per se. People, like me, have dedicated their lives because this is what I feel the Lord has called me to do. But that doesn't stop me that if I feel that I need to go back into, or if I need to go into the sphere of business and start a job or, do something like that, that doesn't mean that I stop preaching the gospel. Yeah. That actually means that the gospel, like the message of Jesus, actually goes with me everywhere I go. So that means that like if I'm working a job, so let's say a good example is the local grocery store, right? So if I'm at the grocery store and I'm a cashier and I'm there, it doesn't mean that I stand up on the register and start telling everyone about Jesus. It can, but we're moved by love. And that's the most important thing, is that every time we talk about evangelism, it's never moved from a place of like an obligation, but always moved by love. So everything we do with love. It's never my obligation, never my job, never anything forced. It's always out of a heart that is willing. Why? Because in the story of Jesus, he was willing to sacrifice his life so that we may have eternal life. So therefore, the same expectations are for me, is that I would be willing to give my time, to give my life, to give everything that I am to this greatest act of love there is. So back to the example. Sorry, I kind of derailed, but I got off track there. But if you're working in a grocery store, it's showing love to people in the way that Jesus would. And again, it comes back to you first really meeting Jesus. And once you have that feeling, you're like, wow, I know what that made me feel like. You actually want to begin to treat other people the same way. So the same kindness that he meets me with is the same kindness I want to meet other people with. The same love that I've received, I want to share that love with others. The same comfort I've received, I want to share that comfort with others. And it's so easy. It's not an obligation. It's not something I'm forced to do, but it's my natural response.
I'm 100% agree with that. And I believe, we are missionaries. We were full-time in that, but you can be a full-time missionary in whatever you do.
Yeah.
And that's so exciting. Like, it's not just, okay, this is the pastor, this is like the missionary, but it's like you are a missionary. You have the responsibility. If you have the encounterment, you have the responsibility, Oh,
yeah.
You have it. Like, now, what are you going to do with that? Yeah. So we are in the same page with that. So we were talking about, like, you are a full-time missionary, that we can be a full-time missionary in whatever we're doing. Like, we can share Jesus wherever we are. But I know you have went to different countries. So I want to hear a story from a place that you've been.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple. I haven't traveled too much as one might think. Sometimes we think, oh, missionaries, they've gone everywhere. I haven't been to too many places, not as many as some other people I know, but just actually this last end of March, April, I was actually in Brazil. So I was leading what we call an outreach. So, taking a group of students, of people, missionaries as well. I think there's about 18 of us or something like that.
It's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people. Yeah. It's hard to
Everything
manage.
Everything was fine?
It was actually my second time in Brazil. And when you're in Brazil, you think your Spanish will actually get you there, but they don't understand you at all in Brazil. So I could kind of understand with the little knowledge of Portuguese and it's some similarities to Spanish, and it was hard. And then also taking other international people with you is also very difficult.
Can imagine.
So I was in Brazil and we were doing evangelism. So we would, on this outreach or this group of this time of going out and preaching the gospel, we would take intentional time to pray, ask the Lord where he wanted us to go, what were we supposed to do, and just, different things like that. And we were in Copacabana, so we were in Rio. And as we were there, I went with a group. We split up into groups of like 4 and 5. So my group had 4 people. And it's a pretty crazy story. But we encountered this man who was just sitting there, and I believe he was homeless. I didn't know. He didn't tell me if he had a house or not, but I would assume because there are quite a few homeless people around the area. And we were actually handing out sandwiches. So we had prepped and made a ton of sandwiches, and we wanted to go and take it to homeless people. But he was like right outside of where we were staying. So we just like, oh, well, you want a sandwich? He looked like he wanted a sandwich, so we gave him a sandwich. And we began we had a translator, so this is how we could figure out what he was saying, and then he could also understand us. We just asked him his name and just asked a little bit, like, what's your story? Like, why are you here right now? he began to tell us a little bit about a story about how he was married to this Swedish woman. And it was really interesting. I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And he used to live about 40 minutes down the road in another like town or city nearby. And we asked him, well, how did you get here? He said, well, my wife kicked me out because I was taking drugs, and she didn't want me in the house if I was going to do drugs. And I guess it's a valid point.
Yeah.
So we began to ask him, like, well, what else? Like, what else has happened? He's like, well, now I live here, and now I'm just on the street. But I don't really have a purpose. So we asked him, well, do you know Jesus? And he said, yeah, I know Jesus. We're like, okay, you ever like had an encounter? Like, you ever experienced his love? He's like, oh yeah, many times. And we're like, okay, interesting. Okay, cool. Like, so there's nothing new to tell him, is what we felt. So, we asked him, okay, well, if you already know Jesus, is there anything we can be praying for? Sometimes if people already know the message, they already know about God, sometimes it's always good to encourage people. Because that's what the gospel is about. So I'm not preaching to him the gospel again, but I'm just reaffirming and saying, like, hey, this is who Jesus is. He wants to encourage you. So we asked him, and he said, yeah, I'd like for you to pray for my wife. And so we asked him, well, are you divorced or are you separated? He said, well, we're not divorced, but we're just taking time apart. Like, he said, like I said, like, she kicked me out of the house, and now I'm here. I said, okay, well, what do you want us to pray for? And he said, well, my wife, and I want her to meet Jesus. And I thought, I was very curious. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, why couldn't he share? So we began to talk, and one thing led to another, and he actually asked our translator for her phone. And I was so confused, and I was like, why does he want her phone? And he started dialing a number. And I was like, I'm not sure who's going to pick up on the other line.
That's a good idea.
I don't know if that's a really good idea, but okay, let's just see where this goes. Because evangelism is fun too. Sometimes you just get to hear people's stories, and you get to do some crazy things, and you end up walking places that you never thought. But anyway, so this was one of those experiences where he started dialing, and it started to ring. And in the back of my head, I was thinking, like, man, I don't know if I really want someone to pick up the phone. I don't know who it's going to be. And I was like, it's probably going to be someone who speaks Portuguese. So I may not understand, and I may have to have the translator try to interpret what this person's on the phone is saying. And this woman answers, and she speaks English.
Wow.
And it turns out it was his wife. And I was so confused. I was like, why did he call her? And so what he was saying, what he wanted us to pray for was actually very true. And he's like, no, pray for her now.
Wow.
So, I grabbed the phone, and we put her on speaker, and I asked her, I was like, hi, there's this man, his name, he says that he knows you. Do you happen to know him? We're in Copacabana, and we're, talking about Jesus, spreading the gospel. Do you know this man? And she says, yes, this is my husband, but we're separated because he's using drugs, but I have kicked him out of the house. I said, oh, okay, that checks out. This is what he told us. Cool. Well, he wanted us to pray for you. And she says, oh, okay. Like, what for? And we're like, well, he told us that he wants you to know Jesus. And she's like, really? And we're like, yeah. And so we're like, do you want to know Jesus? And she's like, it's crazy. Like, 3 days ago, I was sitting in my house, and I was actually thinking, she had told me, she's like, I've tried other religions. I've tried so many other things, but I've heard about Jesus, but never actually taken intentional steps to know him. So she's like, I think this is a really good day to know more about Jesus. So I began to explain to her and just tell her, like, this is who Jesus is. This is his love. This is what you read in the Bible. This is the story of what he's done for us. And she begins to, to like really, like take this in. And I actually asked her, I said, I noticed that she was coughing a lot. And I was like, this is during the COVID time. So at the same time, I was like, okay, like, why are you coughing so much? She said, I had COVID about, I think she said 6 or 8 weeks ago. And ever since then, I have not gotten rid of this cough. I've been COVID free, but this cough has still persisted. And every time I try to speak, I cannot stop coughing. So right then and there, like, I felt like the Lord was telling me, hey, I want you to pray for her for exactly that. So, midway through me telling her about Jesus, I say, hey, can we just pause? I actually want to just pray for you. And she's like, okay. And I was like, okay, like, I can't see you over the phone, but if you could just open up your hands with where you're at, and you can put me on speakerphone, but I'm just going to pray over you. And the rest of my group with me, we're going to all pray for you. And we're going to believe that Jesus is going to heal you. Because this is part of who Jesus is. And is that he heals people. It's like what he paid for on the cross, his blood is enough for healing, right? It's not just salvation, but it's about everything that is not right can be made right again. So I began to pray for her, and I started saying, like, Jesus, I believe that you are a healer, and I believe that you can heal this woman right now. And so I take authority over this cough that has attacked her for this long, Lord, and I just say that it be gone in the name of Jesus. And we start praying, and we're all going at it. And then I asked her, and I said, okay, do you feel anything different? Like, as we were praying and as you opened up your hands, do you feel like anything changed? And she says, yeah, I can actually finally breathe again.
Wow.
It was just crazy. She's like, I can actually take a breath without coughing. Wow. And it was crazy. So I was like, that's it. Yeah. Jesus has actually just healed you right now. And she was like, there's no way. And I was like, yeah. It is. Like, this is who Jesus is. And right then and there, she's like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to give my life to the Lord. Wow. And so I was like, okay, this is great. And I said, okay, can you just repeat after me? And part of what we do is we kind of lead people into a prayer, and it's putting language to what they want from Jesus. So as we do this, is sometimes people don't know how to pray, and that's why we go to Scripture and we say, okay, the Bible has to be a foundation, but we lead them into this prayer and we say, Jesus. And she starts repeating, and we just we do the prayer, and she accepts Jesus. And even after that, no more coughing. Even the rest of the phone call, no more coughing at all. Wow! So she got healed, and she got saved. She accepted Jesus, and she's now like it's crazy because I never met her in person. So this all happened over the phone.
Just through the phone.
Just through the phone.
Wow!
It's crazy. I was like, wow! For me, it was a crazy story because there's no way. Wow. Because when we do evangelism, we want to be personal with people. We want to share something like, you can see me face to face. This is who I was. This is who I am now. You can see the smile on my face. But sometimes it's not even about seeing the people. It's just about actually believing and understanding what they've been through. Yeah. And I think that she could genuinely feel, even after that, after her receiving healing, she was so touched by that. It's like, how is this possible? Like, no other religion, no other thing that I've tried has like satisfied me or made me feel this way like ever before. Wow.
Because she was looking for other religions.
She was looking for something to fill that void, that like hole in her life. Wow. And of course, with the separation of her and her husband, there was that void of like, I feel lonely, and all these things. Wow. But she had just never met Jesus before.
Wow. And this is so crazy. And something interesting for me is like, you guys were not planning it on meeting the first guy.
We saw him, and I was like, he looks like he could need a sandwich. And that's just one small act of love to give a sandwich leads to something so much bigger than you can think and understand. Wow. But that's part of like why Jesus sends us, and it's the commission of going out into all the nations. It's because people are so desperate to fill that void, that thing inside of their life, to feel God's love, but they don't know.
So with that, do God have to speak to you in a specific, like, go and speak to one person, or are you just moved by compassion as you guys were? Like, how that looks like?
I think it can look both ways. I think that you can honestly be moved by compassion, but I think that there are many times that I've either been in like an Uber or something, And the Lord's, like it wasn't even in my mind to like share the gospel or do something. But the Lord speaks to me and he says, hey, you need to tell this person this, or you need to share your story or share love with this person. And it's both. So sometimes it's like, okay, if I understand God's love and I spend time with Jesus and I want to look more like him.
Yeah.
So obviously my life has to reflect love.
Yeah.
And my life reflects Jesus all the time. However, there are moments in that time where I may not be intentionally speaking the gospel to someone, but Jesus reminds me and says, hey, you need to share with this person.
So he says something to you,
Yeah.
he speaks to you. But how you know that he's speaking to you?
Sometimes everyone I think can experience it in different ways. For me, God speaks to me through pictures, images, different things. And I know that it's him because it's not something that I would be thinking about. Yeah. I grew up surfing, so I think there's like a couple things I think about: coffee, surfing, and work.
Yeah.
But there's not many. My mind doesn't go to this, imaginary place often. That there's things that I feel like the Lord gives to me that aren't things that I would normally think about or like think, oh, that's an image that I would have in my brain.
It's like if it cross your mind, like, this is not from me.
Yeah, sometimes it comes to your mind, like, where did this
Yeah.
picture come from? I'm like, okay, this must be the Lord.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I get a picture, I'm like, okay, I have to be intentional. Like, Lord, is this you? And then I just feel, sometimes I hear yes, sometimes I hear confirmation from other people where someone comes up to me, and there's been times where they're like, hey, the Lord just says yes.
Yeah.
Or the Lord just says no.
Yeah.
Or you just feel this sense of peace. It's this feeling of like, it's that peace of when you first experience God that comes upon your life. And it's not something you can find anywhere else because there's nothing like his love.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's how I can hear from God. So to give an example is like if I do have a testimony, but if I'm in an Uber, if I'm going somewhere and I get this image or this picture, I'm like, okay, like this is for sure something I was not even thinking about. Lord, is there something you want to share with this person? And it's that image. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, I don't know you. You don't know me.
Yeah.
But I just saw this picture. And as I begin to share it, I feel like the Lord kind of like downloads things to me and he starts to speak to me more. And there's like things start to become clear.
It takes obedience.
Yeah. So it takes obedience for you to, what am I trying to say?
Or
So
risk.
it takes obedience for you or a risk
Yeah.
to step out with what that little thought that came into your brain and actually act in faith with that and say, okay, I don't know the full details of this. This could be something so meaningless to this person and it could be nothing.
Yeah.
But the Lord wants to speak. So, you take what's been given to you and you steward it and you say, okay, I'm going to share this. And you start with that. And then that obedience and that faith releases for the Lord to speak more. And then all of a sudden, the one image that I have is just the doorway into more of what the Lord wants to speak about that person.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes for me, it's like, if I feel uncomfortable on doing it, I should do it. You know?
Yeah. And that's the element of risk is like, okay, as human beings, we have to put ourselves out of our comfort zone sometimes. And even like more so now, like when we know Jesus, sometimes it's so easy to get comfortable. And sometimes it's easy to not take a risk, to be content with what you know. But I often think like how selfish of me sometimes to think like I know the truth. I have that experience. I see someone else in need of that, but I do nothing.
Wow.
And that's the compassion of saying, I know what I have, I know what they don't, and I can be that door, like that opening door to them meeting Jesus and having the same freedom that I have. Yeah. But it takes risk, and it takes obedience, and it takes faith.
Wow. And I'm 100% agreement with that. Like, like what you're saying, you just have to take a thought that just crossed your mind. Yeah. And you just have to take that, just take the risk, and then you see something. And then you see a miracle, like as you guys did with this girl, with this guy. And it reminds me so many stories, like me walking in the Malecon and just doing something, like, and then the Lord is like, just go and pray for someone. It's like, Lord, is that really you? Like, do I really have to do that? Like, yes, of course, it's something good. It's sharing my love with someone, so you don't need a confirmation. But if something is stopping you, if there is fear coming into your life, if there is doubt coming into your life, you must do it.
Yeah.
I'm 100% on that, man. Like, you must do it. There is fear, there is doubt, and it's something good.
Yeah.
You must do it because a breakthrough, like something big is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like what you said. There's that fear, and there's this thing that we like to put into terms, and I'll explain it. It's called fear of man, and the way I would best describe fear of man is actually caring more about what a person thinks than what God thinks.
Wow.
So sometimes when like you're saying, is you get that thought that comes through your brain, there's so many excuses or reasons as to why I shouldn't, and why it would make sense why I shouldn't do that. But that's not what we preach the gospel for. That's not why we accepted Jesus. You know, when we look at the story of Jesus in the Bible, it's, you know, he was radical. He took risks. He did things. And that's what he's compelling us to do, is go into all the nations, preach to everyone, tell everyone about this thing that you've received. Yeah. And so the second that I start caring more about what people think or what they might say, have lost the importance of the gospel, of the reason why I exist today. And that's because Jesus has set me free from caring what other people think, from caring about what the world thinks about me, you know, to say, and the world is the people who don't know. But now I have this responsibility, is like what you're saying, to carry the gospel, to tell people about Jesus. So whenever I hear from the Lord, and I'm only going to actually begin to hear from the Lord if I actually spend time with him. So if you're questioning, like, do I really hear God's voice? Well, how much time do you spend with him? Because you cannot get to know his voice or what he's saying if you don't spend time with him. You know, it's like your friend. It's like you cannot know what that person's saying. Like if the lights are off, or you put like a wall between you, and this person says something, you will not know who they are unless you actually spend time with them.
And it makes me think, like, why do you have fear?
Yeah.
Because if it's someone that you really know, you shouldn't be afraid of sharing someone that you know everything about it, you know? If you are in love, you are not afraid of sharing that you are in love.
Exactly.
Like, you post in social media, you share in comments, like, you comment on her picture, like, man, you just want to share what you have. You just want to share that love. So you have to get to know that person, and then you break with the fear.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's taking risk is that's why we're talking about, is like the gospel or evangelizing is not just for missionaries, but it's for anyone who loves Jesus and understands his love. You do it anywhere you're at. Yeah. You can do it on an airplane. You can do it on your bus home. You can do it at your job. You can do it anywhere. You could be walking down the street. You could go across to your neighbors. You can tell your friends, your family. It's for anyone and everyone. It's not meant for certain people. Yeah. And evangelism isn't just meant for like a certain kind of people. And I think that's sometimes the lie that we can like kind of believe, is like, oh, I'm not that outgoing. Yeah. Okay, maybe you're not the person who stands up on a table and, you know, shouts. That's definitely not me. Like I don't know, I'm not super outgoing and super like into just meeting new people and then saying, hey, do you know Jesus? But I'm moved by love, right? And that's why I do it. So if there's times to do that, then I do that, because I know that that's the sacrifice I get to pay. The small sacrifice compared to what he paid. Yeah. But it's the acts of love for me. How do I treat people? Am I treating them the same way that Jesus would treat them? Am I treating them like this is the reason why Jesus died? And I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that, you know, like, you have to love someone and able to share on someone. So I think we can finalize with that, like, how can we encourage people to go and preach the gospel?
Yeah. I mean, I would just encourage you guys to take risks, take steps of faith, but let that all happen from the foundation of you actually spending time with God. You want to tell people, you want to encourage people, do it. But make sure that it comes from a place of you actually spending time with God, and then go do it. Because if not, you're going to be doing all these things, but then you may risk you may miss out on actually knowing who Jesus is.
So we just want to encourage everyone today, like, you have something, you had an encounter, even the smallest testimony that you have, just go and share it. Yeah. There is a need, the same encounter that you have with Jesus, like, there's a whole world that is waiting for that.
Yeah.
It's waiting for your encounter. It's waiting for your story. It's waiting for your story of love. Like the whole world wants to know that story.
Yeah.
And you can be the response. You can be the answer. And you can respond like the prayer of someone else and just can take action.
Yeah, I agree.
So thank you everybody for listening, for watching us, for just being there today. And just want to thank you, Asher. Just thank you for sharing your heart on evangelism. And yeah, it was such a blessing. Like I learned so much. And I just want to thank everybody to listen today. And yeah, see you next time.